Hi, you're listening to the TeenTix Arts Podcast, or TAP for short.
Here on TAP, we explore how teens and young people are engaging with music. What is the context that drives our local music scene? What, how, why, and where are teens listening? And, maybe most importantly, how can you be involved?
We conduct interviews, dive into history, and more.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Xandra.
Today, we're covering youth spaces and venues. What do they mean for the Seattle music scene? And, one thing about youth spaces is we might take them for granted, but when there's a place and it's not all ages, you really notice it. I can share a little bit from my experience. About a year ago, one of my favorite artists was coming to Seattle, and I'd been wanting to see him for a while but hadn't had an opportunity to do so, partially because of the pandemic, but also there's a time beforehand that he just hadn't, been touring. So when I saw that he was coming to Seattle, I was really excited, naturally, and as soon as tickets went on sale, I got two. Nowhere on the tickets did it say, if you're under 18, you're under 21, you can't show up. But then, the day I showed up, went across town, I didn't have so much luck. Couldn't get in. It was not an all-ages venue.
Did you get a refund?
I haven't gotten a refund, and it might be too late, but might have to check, we'll see. We'll see, but that's kind of the factor is when those all-ages spaces aren't there, you really notice it. And the fact that it just didn't say anywhere, this isn't all-ages spaces, makes you think maybe it's not something people are thinking about as much.
Yeah, it could happen to anyone.
Yeah.
If it isn't marked, how will we know?
Right.
I haven't been to many venues, actually. I wish I have been, but I recently performed at Columbia City Theater with Totem Star, and I met a bunch of other youth artists, which is like another reason that youth spaces are so important, just to connect with other creative people, other people into music. And it was a really great experience just to see people again, since the pandemic has made us so disconnected from each other.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think one feature of why youth spaces are so relevant is as a youth artist, it's really weird when you show up at a place to perform, but none of your friends can see you perform. And so youth spaces are really, well tailored to, youth artists in that way.
Yeah, definitely.
Today, we're going to be talking about two youth spaces in particular. The Vera Project, which happens to be where we're recording this podcast right now, and the Old Redmond Firehouse.
Today we're going to talk to Maya, the Communications Engagement Director for Vera, and an artist. And we're also going to be talking to Whitney, a teen who engaged with Old Firehouse, and a former program leader.
All right, now we're going to talk to Maya. Maya is the Community Engagement Director for the Vera Project, and they're also an artist who's had the opportunity to perform at Vera as well.
Hey Maya, if you could introduce yourself, maybe your names and pronouns, and your involvement in Vera.
Hey there. Thanks for having me, y'all. My name is Maya DeAvilla. I use she, her pronouns. I'm 24 years old, and I'm the community engagement coordinator here at the Vera Project, and I've been involved with the organization for just about 10 years. Started out as a volunteer, going to shows and being part of the committees and whatnot, and just kind of moving through all the different channels that it offers. And about 2 years ago, ended up getting hired. So it's been quite a journey, and it's been really exciting as well. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for being on. Yeah, and I think that's really interesting perspective to have. You've been there for a while. You've kind of seen how it's changed over time. Could you speak to maybe how the Vera Project itself has evolved since you've been with it? How has it changed?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely changed. How it's different, like you said, evolved. I guess when I first started coming around, it kind of I'm trying to gather my thoughts with this question. It's definitely come a long way. I think over time, with different policies in place and different just like people moving through the space, um, I feel like it's become a lot more structured over the years.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely had its like structure when I first started volunteering, but I think before like it was like a space like kids would like um, come out to after school and like see their friends and maybe get some homework done after class.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it still has that space, but now I think it's great that we have like the organization system in place to make sure like young folks can like track their hours, get different volunteer opportunities even outside of Vera, internships, like that kind of thing, if that makes sense. So I guess it's like overall like a lot more organized over the years and just like every year being a part of the space, just seeing that structure become a lot more sturdier in an organization.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's really fascinating. Kind of how it's kind of gotten built out like that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's really cool to see how Vera has evolved, like, especially during the pandemic. I was involved with them for a bit online virtually, so it's cool to see people coming back in person. And you mentioned that you're a volunteer, so I was wondering, how did you go from being a volunteer to a staff member at Vera, and what were the roles and opportunities in between?
I started volunteering when I was 15. There were a couple people at Vera who were like a part of the steering committee and um, doing house managing and just like encouraging me to like keep on coming and getting more involved. And so I started just volunteering as much as I could. Like once I like officially like moved here, just doing like box office and security and photography. Like that was my biggest thing when I first started coming to shows, was doing like concert photography. And one thing that's like supernatural I feel about like being a part of Vera is like the more time you spend at Vera, the more it like feels like home and the more that it feels like a piece of you and like almost like a sense of ownership over the space, which is extremely important, like being like a young person. And so like that kind of gives you like I guess the mindset and like encourages you to like take on more opportunity in the space, or at least that's how it was for me. So like the more time I spent there and the more like I guess responsibility I was given in the space, it made me like want to like move up onto like more things I could do. So like, and then when I was in college, I took on one of the administrative internships for some college credit, and so I feel like at that point I was like my most like peak involvement at Vera. From there, it just like more and more opportunities like kept coming my way. I would say just right before the pandemic, it was just like I was really involved with the space, being a part of committees and hosting members meetings. So um, it definitely felt like very like natural, like going from that um, level of involvement to like getting hired like mid pandemic.
Yeah, it's I mean, thank you, because it's just really interesting to hear about kind of that path, because I think a lot of people sort of volunteer to get, some experience to really engage with stuff, but it can really grow into so much. So that's really interesting to kind of hear your story in that way.
And our last question for you is, why are youth spaces like Vera important?
Basically, the Vera Project is important because not only do we harbor a safe space for youth and anybody from any different background to come to a show or an art exhibit, but just also an environment for them to express themselves creatively, gain confidence, gain skills that they never thought they could have in an open community where they can connect with peers and mentors and just an overarching group of supportive folks with no judgment, um, and just like overall support. You know, they can get into classes, whether they're into audio or screen printing, booking shows, um, you know, even political organizing with the base committee. So there's just so much to offer. And I guess like for me being a young person in this space, I really didn't know where I wanted to go. You know, I thought I was going to be a famous concert photographer. And yeah, my direction it took me a different direction. But in that moment, during that time when I was like 15 years old, it gave me like a sense of direction for what I wanted to do, being like a young person, freshly moved to Seattle. So I think it gives that um, mindset, I guess, to other folks, young folks as well. And I'm just hoping we can continue to build out young leadership and build out young folks gaining confidence and skills.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that really sums it up perfectly, you know. So we appreciate, you know, you being on with us and answering these questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
of
thank you
course,
so
of
much.
course.
Yeah. All right. So I guess that about does it. But yeah, just thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And you all know how folks can get involved with the Vera Project.
Yeah, we're highlighting, you know, a handful of kind of, you know, opportunities coming up, just sort of some shows and events, but also the classes that are coming up and like the volunteer orientation kind of opportunities. So
Sweet. Yeah,
are there
that's
any
what I was
others you
gonna.
want to highlight or?
The only thing I was gonna bring up is the volunteer orientations are every second Thursday and Saturday of the month, and there's no RSVP necessary. Just fill out an application on the website and come through and get involved.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for talking. It was so good to meet you.
Yeah. All right. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. Have a good one. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks again to Maya from the Vera Project. You know, Vera has overcome a lot of challenges, and we're going to talk about one of those now. When we're thinking about the context that a lot of these youth venues in Seattle and the area were kind of born out of, it's really important to think about one policy that was in place from 1985 to 2002 when the Vera Project was founded. And this was the Teen Dance Ordinance.
The Teen Dance Ordinance included some age limits, like anyone under 15 would be required to have a parent or a guardian chaperone, which doesn't leave a lot of room for independence as a teen. And security requirements, 2 off-duty police officers were required on premises to patrol the outside area. And insurance, $1 million in liability insurance was a requirement.
You know, that's just so significant and kind of intense, honestly, both the security requirement and the $1 million liability insurance that really cut back the ability for you know, youth venues to function at all. According to the Vera Project website, they say that the Teen Dance Ordinance, quote, essentially banned all ages and youth-driven concerts by making events with underage attendees prohibitively expensive and nearly impossible to produce.
Because of the ordinance, a lot of youth music disappeared because people couldn't access it, and it went to the suburbs like Redmond.
One of the things that came out of this kind of youth music flight to the suburbs was the Old Redmond Firehouse, which came together in the early 90s. The Old Redmond Firehouse is the longest standing all-ages event center for youth in the Seattle area, and so it has a lot of historical significance with youth-oriented artists like Fugazi and Bikini Kill having played there.
And it started as nightlife at Redmond Middle School gym. It really became a place for community to engage with art projects, discussion, and other programs.
Yeah, it was aimed to become a program for unconventional youth to engage in, those youth who didn't feel like they had community elsewhere to really build that community.
Next, we're going to be talking to Whitney, who is a teen who engaged with Old Firehouse and a former program leader and an artist. So, Whitney, Could you introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, and your involvement in the Old Firehouse?
Yeah, my name is Whitney Ballen, and I use she, her pronouns. I grew up in Redmond, going to the Old Firehouse Teen Center, attending like all ages shows there and doing some of their like art programs. And then I actually ended up working there as a program leader when I was graduating from college at the University of Washington. And so it kind of went full circle there from attending as a teen and participating and then working there. So that's like a little overview.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on with us and, sharing that perspective. You got to, experience it, as a teen, going to shows, playing shows, and then, as you mentioned, as a program leader. So you were there for a while. Could you speak to maybe how the Firehouse's programs for youth shifted or evolved over your time there?
When I was attending as a teen, it was pretty loose. I mean, it was less structured, I would say. As a teen center, it was more of like a gathering space, and just like a very just like a welcoming, safe space where you could go after school and on the weekends and meet new people who had similar interests as you, and also bond with the staff there. Really, it was just like a platform for you to explore what you might be interested in that wouldn't be available like at school, for example, and maybe not available to you at home. We wanted to make sure to engage people who had just like a wide variety of interests and like get them involved in something that maybe was outside of their comfort zone. And over time, I guess, because some of the teens just like wanted it to be just a place where they could escape to instead of like being not forced, but like encouraged to engage in a specific activity. And so I think that like kind of changed the type of audience that the teen center like recruited in a sense. And like word on the street, I guess, kind of changed over time. But both structures, like whether it was like just like, hey, this is a place to come and be safe and like explore what you want to do, and then the structure of like having specific planned programming, they both had like huge benefits, and both were super supportive to the teens in the area at the time, and then they both had their challenges. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, it seems like there's like definitely a lot of like growth and sort of in its programs, and just like very kind of eclectic is like what really kind of came through and like what you're talking about, and definitely kind of going beyond just like a music venue, to become kind of a larger sort of fixture of the community. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, all of those opportunities you talked about makes me want to visit. Like, it sounds like a really good place for community and like meeting friends. Do you think you could go more in depth about like the services that the Old Firehouse provided for the youth while you were there?
So, yeah, when I was there, the Firehouse was doing, I think it was every Wednesday, they had what was called Teen Feed. And that was a free dinner that was provided by either like a local like nonprofit, or there was a church around the corner that people would volunteer and bring a different meal like every Wednesday. And Friends of Youth was pretty involved there, which is a nonprofit. And they sometimes provided a counselor that would come in and have their own office and have open hours for teens. A counselor open hours for something called Be Glad. It was essentially for queer youth who needed support, and there'd be weekly meetings trying to like build community with those who identified as queer. So all around, it was like a very giving space.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. You know, those seem like really valuable resources, and, you know, kind of having a place where you can sort of get those resources and, you know, really share those with others can have a big impact on someone. I guess just to kind of like our last question, and it's a broad one, so take it how you will, is kind of like, why are youth spaces like the Old Redmond Firehouse important?
Whenever I tell people who are from out of state about my experience, like growing up in music and at specific spaces like the Firehouse and the Vera Project, people are shocked that a space like that exists, because it is very rare that there's a free space that people can go to and access resources, like I mentioned, and with support from adults that are, or like young adults that have the same interests as them as like role models. It's just so rare. It's so important to have access to free community inclusive spaces that that really like won't turn you away for being interested in something that isn't taught at school. Overall, people need spaces like the Firehouse to really like help encourage creativity and like out of the box thinking, and to be able to just like find support that they can actually feel connected with that is outside of like an institutional setting.
Honestly, it's just so well put, and you know, I think that, you know, hearing about, you know, how there's still these all ages spaces hanging on, but you know, many are no longer kind of functioning at the same level. You know, it's kind of you know, like a call to action in a sense. So thank you for sharing that, and just for this conversation broadly. It's been really interesting.
Once again, thank you to Whitney for speaking to us. We really appreciate her time. Well, in my opinion, it's important to build connections, safe spaces, and bonds with other youth, because we can miss out on a lot when we don't talk to people, when we don't get to know them. And it's important that we're surrounded by people that understand like the struggles of being a teen, the realities of being a teen, and other like creative opportunities that we might want to get involved with. You could learn about that through talking to people.
Exactly. You know, that's exactly right. And as we mentioned, you know, with Vera and with the Old Redmond Firehouse, they don't just have concerts. They have classes. They have other program opportunities. And so you can really learn a lot about, if you want to end up doing something in the music industry or broadly, you can learn a lot from these youth spaces. If you want to be your own band, if you want to help manage a band or create merch or something along those lines. And yeah, it's really served as a way for teens to connect who otherwise might not have community, you know, queer youth, you know, other youth who are kind of have been sort of pushed to the margins historically. It's really been an ideal space to connect. And I know that's been the case for both Vera and the Old Redmond Firehouse. So now we're going to talk about some events that are coming up, some volunteer opportunities that you who are listening can engage with at both of these places.
Starting with the Vera Project, they have intro to concert lighting, intro to live sound, screen printing. They hold this about every few weeks.
Yeah, all of those different sort of classes are held every few weeks. You can go to their website for more information on when it's coming up that's convenient to you. They also have a show coming up on March 8th, some eclectic ska bands. We Are the Union, Catbite, Kill Lincoln. I've seen Catbite myself at the Vera Project, and they're great. And I know that We Are the Union and Kill Lincoln bring those killer horns, those killer ska horns.
Also, orientations for volunteering on the 9th and 11th. Really good opportunities. The Vera Project is such a fun place to be and volunteer for. You can meet a lot of cool people.
Yeah, you can be a part of making the Vera Project work and making it happen, which is really significant. Another show that's coming up is Melt and Tomo Nakayama on March 3rd.
Another class is Mixing for Monitors, March 11th.
And the fabric printing class is coming up on March 11th as well. So really interesting if you're thinking about kind of, sort of printing on clothes or otherwise. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so moving on to Redmond, there's screen printing classes.
There's also jam sessions that are held relatively regularly. So if you want to connect with other musicians, if you want to form a band maybe but don't really know anyone, it's a really good opportunity to connect.
There's also the Redmond Youth Partnership Advisory Committee, which is good for if you want to get into leadership, if you want to focus on community service and giving back to the community. You can get volunteer opportunities, you can participate in community events, and it's just a really good place to, once again, meet people, find opportunities.
Right, and all these events and opportunities just demonstrate how wide the range is in Vera and Old Redmond Firehouse's programming. They're music venues, yes, but they also help to demonstrate some of the interesting classes and community events that are available to youth in the Seattle area right now. And as we now know, with the Teen Dance Ordinance, these weren't always available.
We also have a playlist of songs that we've been listening to in 2022 that you can access in the description.
I know that one song that I've been listening to is, it's more of an EP, Field of Dreams by Yippee. I'm pretty sure it's an Arizona artist, but I just stumbled across this EP on CD in a record store and really like the cover art. And it's some really interesting kind of lo-fi music with some interesting interpretation of auto-tune. Recommend checking it out.
One song that I'm listening to is Do I Make You Nervous by Dreamer Isioma. They are a really beautiful sounding and soothing artist. It has a really dreamy type of sound, so I definitely recommend listening.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. That's a wrap for this month's Tap. That's the first episode down.
And the music you're hearing is by Totem Star artist Aleyanna Grae, and the song is Periwinkle.
We want to shout out Grant Boo for editing this episode.
And we want to thank Ground Zero Radio and the Vera Project for making the production of this episode possible.
Lastly, thank you to TeenTix. You've been listening to the TeenTix Arts Podcast, uplifting youth voices and artists in the local music scene through access to education and critical discussion.